Why did they laugh at something they didn't understand? Why did a single mark on a woman's skin make seasoned soldiers sneer? They saw ink, nothing more. They didn't know the history behind it, the weight it carried, or the dead it honored. Not yet. The sun burned white over Fort Braxton that afternoon, the kind of heat that melted steel and made tempers short. Rows of Humvees lined the tarmac like silent beasts, their hoods too hot to touch. Dust lifted in shimmering waves, carried by the Carolina wind. Somewhere, a drill instructor barked at recruits. Somewhere else, an engine roared to life, rattling metal walls. But in the middle of all that chaos, unnoticed, moved one figure. Her name was Staff Sergeant Madison Cooper, 26 years old, Medical Support Division. To most eyes, she was background noise, clipboard in hand, tan fatigues tucked in neat, her hair tied tight, her sleeves rolled high. She looked like any other mid-level staff NCO, a cog in the machinery of Fort Braxton. She wasn't built like a fighter. Her voice wasn't loud like the sergeants who lived to command. She didn't carry a weapon. She carried paperwork, requests, supply records, the kind of work no one bragged about. She was liked by the quartermasters, overlooked by the brass, and nearly invisible to the elite operators who passed through. Except for one thing. On her forearm, just above the wrist, was an intricately inked tattoo. A combat medic's cross, bold and black, its lines precise, its edges sharp. To the untrained eye, it was nothing more than a medic's symbol. To some, it was even a joke. "She's got a medic badge on her arm," one of the infantry kids muttered in the chow line. "What's she gonna do? Bandage the enemy to death?" The men around him chuckled, loud enough for her to hear. Madison didn't flinch. She picked up her tray, moved to a quiet table at the far end, and ate in silence. That was how she survived Fort Braxton. Quiet, efficient, forgettable. But the tattoo never stayed invisible for long. The next day, a blacked-out convoy rolled through the gates. 6 men stepped out. They didn't wear smiles. They didn't make noise. They wore gear, weapons, and scars. Tier 1 operators, the kind of soldiers whose presence made rooms shrink. Navy SEALs, maybe, or Delta, or something even deeper. Madison was at the rear supply desk when they entered. She kept her head down, eyes on her clipboard, but she felt their presence before she saw them. The room seemed heavier, air thicker. The lead man stepped forward. His beard was gray at the edges, his stance relaxed but coiled. He looked her up and down. "You the clerk?" he asked. She lifted her eyes, calm and steady. "I'm the logistics officer of record." He smirked. "Didn't ask for your resume, Doc." One of the younger men chuckled. "Man, I've seen more muscle on a Starbucks barista." Laughter again. The same tone, the same dismissive edge. Madison said nothing. She handed them the signed-off crate, her posture straight, her face unreadable. Then something shifted. The last man in the group stepped forward. He was older than the rest, hair silver at the temples, eyes like burnt steel. He froze, not at her, but at the tattoo on her wrist. The room went silent. He straightened, blinked once, then lifted his hand. Slowly, formally, a salute. The operators stared, confused. "Sir," one of them muttered. But the older man did lower his hand. His eyes stayed locked on her. Madison hesitated. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. Then she returned the salute, sharp, exact. The silence cracked when the commander spoke. His voice was low, even. "Permission to speak freely, Sergeant." Her throat was dry, but she nodded. He leaned closer, close enough that only she could hear. 4 words. "You were at Fallujah." Every muscle in the room stiffened. The men who had laughed a minute ago now stood motionless, staring at her wrist. That tattoo wasn't just ink. It wasn't just a medic's cross. It was a code, a symbol that belonged to ghosts, soldiers tied to an operation that officially didn't exist. Operation Crimson Star. 5 years ago, 27 operatives went dark. None were listed as survivors. They were presumed killed, all of them. Yet here she was. The younger SEAL, the one who'd mocked her frame, swallowed hard. How are you still active? But Madison didn't answer. She turned, walked away from the supply desk and vanished into the corridor. The older commander stayed frozen in place, his eyes locked on the empty doorway. His hands slowly lowered, but his voice was firm, almost reverent. "She's not just active," he muttered. "She's the reason we're alive." The words lingered, heavy, inescapable. By morning, the whispers had spread like wildfire. At 5:30, Madison walked into the chow hall. Same boots, same fatigue, same silence, but every head turned, forks paused, conversations dipped. Someone had printed a blurry photo of her tattoo and taped it by the mess hall entrance. Across it, in red marker, one word: poser. A few recruits laughed, louder than usual. She didn't slow, she didn't react. She filled her tray, eggs, toast, black coffee, and sat alone, her back to the room. It would have stayed just another day of silence, of cold stares and hidden whispers. But then two officers entered, Lieutenant Rodriguez and Major Stevens, both career men, both hard as nails, both quick to cut down anyone who hadn't earned their place. They spotted the photo on the wall, snickered. Rodriguez did lower his voice. "Looks like her tattoo has more clearance than her IQ." A burst of laughter filled the room. Madison placed her fork down. Her shoulders eased, but her hands didn't move. Stevens walked closer, tapped the photo with his finger. "This you," his voice carried across the mess. She didn't respond. He stepped in tighter. "You think putting that emblem on your skin makes you a ghost, makes you one of them. You're wearing history you didn't earn." Still, she didn't answer. Rodriguez leaned in, smirking. "Let me guess. Your boyfriend was a ranger. You stole it from his jacket while he slept." Madison looked up. Her eyes were steady, cold. "No," she said flatly. "But my co wore it on his chest the day we breached a compound in Fallujah. I was third in." The room froze. Stevens' face drained. "What did you just say?" Madison rose from her seat. Her back was straight, her tray untouched. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. "You've had your laugh. Now let me speak with someone who knows what that emblem means." And with that she walked, not along the edges, not in shadows. She walked straight down the middle of the mess hall, every soldier watching, forks frozen, conversations dead. She didn't stop until she reached the door marked operations. She knocked once. "Enter," a voice called, rough and direct. Colonel Marcus Kine looked up from his desk. His hair was salt and pepper, his shoulders squared by decades of service. Above his chest, a silver combat medic badge gleamed. "Staff Sergeant Cooper," she said. Her voice was calm. "Requesting permission to clarify my record." Kine gestured for her to continue. She reached into her pocket and laid a folded paper on his desk. It was creased, stamped with layers of security seals. He unfolded it. His face hardened as he read the first line. "Operation Crimson Star. Operative Code Angel 7. His lips parted, breath caught. Madison slowly pulled back her sleeve, exposing the full tattoo. A combat medic's cross encircled with coordinates. "That's the Angel Code," she said softly. "Only 2 of us had it. The other is buried in Arlington." Kine didn't answer. He stood, walked around the desk. And then he saluted. Through the open door, soldiers in the hall stopped mid-step. Their eyes widened as they saw it. Colonel Kine, decorated, unyielding, saluting a staff sergeant. Madison returned it, crisp, flawless. Then she turned, walked out. When she stepped back into the mess hall, silence followed her. Rodriguez and Stevens stood stiff, their mocking laughter dead in their throats. One soldier whispered, "She's Angel 7. Another, "That op was a myth, ghost protocol." Madison walked past them, past the photo still taped to the wall. Someone had already torn it down. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The silence she left behind spoke louder. than any laughter ever could. What did it mean to carry a ghost on your skin? What did it cost to live with a secret so heavy that even your own brothers-in-arms couldn't know? Madison Cooper had learned long ago, silence could wound deeper than any bullet. The whispers followed her everywhere now. By midweek, Fort Braxton had turned into a rumor mill. In the gym, weights clattered but conversations hushed when she walked in. In the motor pool, wrenches stopped spinning as mechanics tracked her every move. Even in the chapel on Sunday, eyes lingered longer than prayers. "She's Angel 7, someone muttered in line for the PX. No, Angel 7 didn't survive Fallujah. Then why did Colonel Kind salute her? The questions spread, but Madison never answered them. She kept to her routine, morning runs before dawn, duty reports filed sharp, meals eaten in silence. She carried her clipboard through the dust and heat as if nothing had changed. But everything had. Men who once mocked her now stared with unease, as though trying to fit two versions of her into one uniform. The invisible clerk, and the ghost of a mission that never officially existed. What they didn't know, what she could never tell them, was how that tattoo had been burned into her skin not by ink alone, but by blood. Fallujah. The name still clawed at her dreams. Nights came with sandstorms in her head, streets filled with fire and the echo of men calling out, voices lost in the smoke. She had been 21 then, too young, too unprepared, and yet chosen. Operation Crimson Star had demanded the impossible. It wasn't just combat, it was erasure. A unit built to vanish. No records, no recognition, no graves with names carved deep. They were sent where even the bravest refused to tread, under orders signed in rooms without windows. She remembered stepping off the Black Hawk into choking heat, rifle slung across her back though she carried more bandages than bullets. She remembered the compound, high walls, narrow alleys, the smell of rot and cordite. And she remembered the first man she treated. A ranger, throat torn open, eyes wide with panic. She pressed her hand into the wound, whispered steady words, and felt his pulse flicker out beneath her palm. That was the first, not the last. The emblem she bore was not a decoration. It was survival. Out of 27 operatives, only 2 had made it out. 2. One buried in Arlington. One walking the halls of Fort Braxton under borrowed time. Madison told no one. She had promised silence the day she was debriefed. Promised to let history bury the operation, to live as if it had never happened. But silence had its price. On Thursday night, she sat alone in the barracks' common room. A single lamp buzzed above her, throwing long shadows on the walls. Her boots were unlaced, her fatigue jacket draped over the chair. She rubbed the tattoo with her thumb, tracing the black cross and the faint coordinates that circled it. Coordinates, to anyone else just numbers, to her a graveyard. She closed her eyes, hearing the echo of screams, the concussive thud of a door blown inward, the choking cough of smoke and blood. Her chest tightened. She pressed her forehead against her fist in breath slow, steady, until the wave passed. A sound broke the stillness, a knock at the door. She looked up. Lieutenant General Harrison Foster stepped in. The same man who had saluted her days earlier. His presence filled the room, though he moved quietly, deliberately. His eyes locked on hers, sharp and unyielding. "Staff Sergeant," he said, voice low. She stood at once, heels together, chin raised. "Sir." He studied her for a long moment. "You've kept your oath of silence, longer than anyone had a right to ask of you." Her throat tightened. She didn't reply. Foster stepped closer. "But the walls are whispering now. Your name is in men's mouths. Your past is bleeding into the present. That won't hold for long." She met his gaze. "With respect, sir, I haven't said a word." He nodded slowly. "I know, that's why I'm here." He placed a file on the table between them. The folder was thick, edges frayed, its cover marked with red stamps, classified. Madison's eyes flicked to it, then back to him. Foster's voice lowered further. There are things in there you might want to remember, and things you might wish you could forget again. He turned to leave but paused at the door. His profile cut sharp against the light. The men laughed at your tattoo because they didn't know what it cost, but cost always comes due, Sergeant. Always. Then he was gone. Madison stared at the folder. Her hands twitched, but she didn't touch it, not yet. She sat back, heart hammering, breath shallow. The file was a wound waiting to be reopened. She closed her eyes. For a moment she was back in the compound. The corridor stank of smoke. Gunfire rattled the walls. A man's voice shouted, "Angel 7, we need you." Her eyes snapped open. The file still sat on the table, waiting. The next morning the base felt different. The whispers had quieted, not gone, just buried under tension. Officers passed her in the hall without comment, but their eyes lingered too long. Recruits lowered their voices when she walked by. And then came the orders. Colonel Kynes summoned her to operations. His face was unreadable, his jaw set. He held a sheet of paper in one hand. "Staff Sergeant Cooper," he said, tone formal. "You've been attached to a forward deployed advisory team. Temporary orders, effective immediately." Her pulse slowed. Advisory team was a cover term. She'd heard it before. It meant movement. It meant contact. It meant ghosts weren't allowed to rest. She nodded once. "Understood, sir." He studied her, maybe searching for fear, maybe for refusal, but her face betrayed neither. As she turned to leave, Kynes said quietly, "Some men live their whole careers without carrying a secret worth dying for. You've been carrying one since you were 21. Be careful it doesn't crush you, Cooper." That night she sat again in the common room. The file Foster had left was still there. She hadn't opened it, not until now. Her hands trembled as she flipped the cover. Photographs spilled out, grainy images, maps marked with circles, pages stamped with words she hadn't seen in years, Crimson Star. Her breath caught when she saw the first photo. A squad lined up against a compound wall, their faces young, tired, hard. 27 men and women. And herself standing in the back, her medic's kit strapped tight, her eyes trying to look older than they were. Her vision blurred. She pressed a hand against the photo, fingertips brushing the face of Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Hayes, her the man she had followed into the fire. The man who never came out. A sob tried to escape her throat, but she swallowed it down. Not here, not now. The second photo made her blood run cold. It was newer, recent. A satellite image of the same compound, still standing, rebuilt, alive. Her chest hollowed. If the compound still stood, then so did those who had taken everything from her unit. Her heart pounded. Foster hadn't just brought her a file, he'd brought her a question. Was she ready to face it again? The lamp buzzed above her, shadows stretching long across the floor. She stared at the tattoo on her wrist. The ink seemed darker under the light, the coordinates sharper, as if they knew something she didn't. Her lips parted. Her voice came as a whisper, barely audible. "It's not over." And deep down she knew it never had been. Why would the army send her back? Why now, after 5 years of silence, after swearing her into shadows? Madison Cooper had lived invisible for so long she had almost convinced herself it would last forever. Almost. The orders changed everything. At dawn she boarded the transport plane. Engines roared against the runway, the air inside thick with oil and dust. Her gear bag sat at her feet, boots pressed to the metal floor. Around her, soldiers strapped in, checking weapons, cracking jokes too loud to be natural. Their voices betrayed nerves they wouldn't admit. Madison sat silent, hands folded, eyes fixed on nothing. Across from her, a young ranger with sharp eyes leaned in. "You really Angel 7?" His tone was half curiosity, half challenge. She didn't look at him. "Eat your breakfast, soldier." A few men laughed nervously, but none pressed further. The nickname had spread beyond Fort Braxton now, carried like smoke through ranks and rumor mills. Angel 7, a ghost code name whispered in briefing rooms, tied to stories of impossible missions and unmarked graves. Some believed, most doubted, but all stared at her as though trying to see if the legend matched the woman. The plane shuddered, lifting into the sky. Madison gripped the straps of her seat, not out of fear, but to steady herself against the rush of memory. The vibration of the fuselage carried her back to the first time she flew into the unknown, packed shoulder to shoulder with men who didn't think she belonged. Fallujah. Her breath slowed. She forced herself to release the straps. Not now, not here. A voice cut through her thoughts. Sergeant Cooper. She looked up. Captain Rivers, team lead, stood in the aisle. His jaw was square, his uniform crisp despite the cramped quarters. He wasn't old, but he carried the air of someone who had seen enough to never be surprised again. He studied her for a beat too long. You've been attached to my advisory team. You've read your orders. Yes, sir. You understand your role. Yes, sir. He narrowed his eyes. Good. Then let me make one thing clear. Whatever you did 5 years ago, wherever you've been, that's not this. This team doesn't trade in ghost stories. We trade in trust. Earn it or stay out of the way. The plane rattled as it cut through turbulence. Madison met his stare without blinking. Understood. He nodded once, then moved on, but the message lingered heavy in the air. The flight stretched long. Hours blurred into one another. Madison closed her eyes, but sleep refused to come. The sound of boots shifting, rifles clinking, whispered conversations, every detail reminded her of the night they lifted into Fallujah. She pressed her thumb into her wrist, tracing the tattoo again. The ink was smooth, but to her it felt like scar tissue. The coordinates curved around the cross like shackles. Her stomach twisted. The younger ranger's question echoed back. You really Angel 7? What answer could she give? She had lived, that was all. The plane touched down on a forward airstrip somewhere nameless. Heat blasted as the hatch opened, dust stinging eyes, engines howling like beasts. The men disembarked quickly, their boots sinking into dirt baked under foreign sun. Madison followed, her steps steady, but inside her chest tightened with every breath. The compound they reached wasn't much: concrete walls, sandbags stacked like forgotten bricks, a flag torn at the edge. Soldiers moved with the rhythm of routine, carrying crates, checking perimeter, smoking in the shade of armored trucks. It looked ordinary, too ordinary. But Madison knew better. Captain Rivers led the briefing that night. The room was dim, lit by a single projector humming against the wall. Maps flickered with red circles, grainy photos pinned to coordinates. Madison sat at the edge of the table, hands folded, eyes fixed on the glowing images. There it was, the compound rebuilt, alive. Rivers tapped the photo with a gloved finger. Intel suggests insurgent activity resumed here within the last year. Small arms fire, smuggling routes, possibly foreign backing. Our job is to assess, quietly. No fireworks unless ordered. One of the soldiers scoffed. Sir, this looks like more than smuggling. Place is a fortress. Rivers shot him a look. Our orders are clear, advisory only. We're not kicking doors. Madison's throat tightened. Her eyes stayed locked on the image. The walls looked the same. The layout hadn't changed. Even the scorch marks still shadowed one corner, faint scars of the night everything had burned. Her heart pounded. She could almost hear it again, the gunfire, the shouting, the screams. She forced her voice steady. Sir, with respect, that compound doesn't run small arms. It ran coordination cells. Foreign trained, structured. If it's alive again, it's not smuggling, it's staging. The room went silent. Every head turned toward her. Rivers' jaw tensed. You sound certain, Sergeant. Her gaze didn't waver, because I've been inside it. A ripple ran through the team. Some leaned back, arms crossed. Others frowned, skeptical. The young ranger who had questioned her on the plane stared openly now, eyes narrowed. Rivers studied her for a long moment, then clicked the projector off. Darkness swallowed the room, broken only by the hum of generators outside. "Dismissed," he said. Chairs scraped, boots thudded, whispers carried as the men filed out. Madison remained seated, her hands pressed flat against the table, her breathing slow, controlled. Rivers lingered by the door. "Cooper." She looked up. His voice was low, almost a growl. "I don't know what game you're playing, but if you think war stories are going to steer this mission, you're mistaken. Don't speak unless spoken to." Her jaw tightened. She wanted to argue, to force him to see, but instead she only said, "Understood, sir." When the room emptied, she sat alone in the dark. Her hands trembled as she pulled the photo of the compound closer. Her fingertips traced the outline of the walls, the gates, the corners she remembered bleeding men behind. Her lips moved before she realized it. A whisper cracked and broken. "Why here again? Why now?" The shadows didn't answer. Later that night, lying in a bunk too small for the weight she carried, Madison stared at the ceiling. Sleep came in fragments. Dreams bled into memory. She saw faces, Hayes, her shouting orders. Ramirez, the sniper, covering their flank. Carter, her friend, laughing in the dark before the breach. Then the breach itself. The blast, the fire, the screams. She woke with a jolt, sweat running cold down her spine. Her pulse hammered in her throat. She sat upright, elbows on knees, breathing ragged. Across the room, a pair of eyes watched her. The young ranger, awake, silent. He didn't look away, neither did she. Finally, he whispered across the dark, "You really were there, weren't you?" Her silence was the only answer. But silence was enough, because in it he saw the truth. The next morning, the team prepped for reconnaissance. Weapons were checked, radios tuned, armor strapped tight. Madison pulled her kit together with the same quiet precision she had always carried. Bandages packed, vials secured, tools ready. Yet her chest felt heavy. The compound was no longer just a map. It was a wound waiting to be reopened. As they loaded into vehicles, the sun rose sharp over the horizon, painting the sand in fire. Madison climbed into the back of the armored Humvee, the tattoo on her wrist catching the light. One of the men glanced at it, then at her. His expression was no longer mockery. It was something closer to fear. The engines growled to life. The convoy rolled forward. Every mile brought them closer to the compound. Every mile brought her closer to the past she had tried so hard to bury. And somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered, "This time not everyone will come back." Why did the road feel so familiar? Why did every mile of dust and silence drag her further back into the fire she thought she'd left behind? The convoy rumbled across the barren stretch of desert. Engines growled, tires chewed gravel, and heat shimmered above the ground like mirages waiting to swallow them whole. Madison sat in the back of the lead Humvee, her kit bag strapped tight against her leg. The men around her shifted, restless, their rifles balanced across their laps. No one spoke much. The silence wasn't comfortable, it was heavy, uneasy. Captain Rivers rode up front. His radio crackled every few minutes, short bursts of coded chatter. He never looked back at her, but his voice carried hard, clipped orders. Beside Madison sat the young ranger, the same one who had asked too many questions. He glanced at her wrist more than once, eyes drawn to the black cross tattoo. He didn't ask this time. He didn't need to. The convoy slowed as they reached a ridge. Vehicles halted. Dust swirled around them. Out, Rivers barked. Doors slammed open. Boots hit dirt. The heat pressed down like a weight. They moved up the ridge in silence, the crunch of gravel underfoot the only sound. At the top, the land fell away into a basin. And there it was. The compound. Madison froze. From a distance, it looked almost identical to the one in her memory. High walls, narrow gate, the faint shape of guard towers. The angles were the same. Even the shadows fell across it as they had that night. Her chest tightened, her breath caught. She forced herself to blink to focus. Rivers raised binoculars. 2 guards, maybe 3. No heavy armor spotted, doesn't look like much. But Madison saw more. She saw the choke points, the blind corners, the places men had died. She saw the walls she had pressed her back against, the alleys slick with blood. Her fingers twitched against her kit bag. Her pulse hammered in her ears. "Sergeant Cooper," Rivers said without turning. "Medical notes, what's your read?" Her throat was dry, she swallowed. That compound doesn't just hold fighters, it holds command, medical supplies, secure storage. If it's active again, it's not just tactical, it's operational. Rivers lowered the binoculars, frowned. "And you know this how?" The question hung, she didn't answer, couldn't. He shook his head. "We're not storming shadows, we're here to observe, keep your theories to yourself." He moved off, signaling for the team to spread, to set observation posts. Madison remained a moment longer at the ridge. Her eyes burned against the site of the compound. The air smelled of dust and fuel, but in her mind it reeked of smoke and blood. Her vision blurred. She was there again. The door blown inward, the flash of light, screams in English and Arabic tangled together. Her hands pressed against a wound, blood pouring hot across her fingers. Voices shouting her name, "Angel 7, here, here." Her knees buckled. She gripped the dirt until her nails tore. Her breath came sharp, ragged. Then a voice cut through the haze. "You okay, Sergeant?" She snapped back. The young ranger stood a few feet away, rifle slung, watching her with narrowed eyes. She steadied her breathing, forced her posture straight. "I'm fine." He didn't look convinced. "That place, you've seen it before, haven't you?" She said nothing. Silence stretched between them until he muttered, "Guess that answers my question." He walked off, leaving her alone with the ghosts. By nightfall, the team settled into overwatch positions. Madison crouched behind a berm, scanning the compound through low-light optics. Figures moved in and out, patterns, rotations. Not random, organized. Her chest tightened again. This wasn't smuggling. This was infrastructure. She keyed her radio softly. "Activity cycle, 3 on the gate, swap every 2 hours. Lights stay on perimeter. Interior movement suggests comm center on east wing." Rivers' voice came back sharp. "Cooper, stick to medical reports. You're not intel." Her jaw clenched. She clicked off without replying. The hours dragged. The desert cooled, the night wind biting through fabric. Madison's eyes stayed locked on the compound. Every flicker of light, every shadow across the wall twisted her stomach tighter. At one point she thought she saw him. Hayes. His figure moving along the wall just like that night. The tilt of his shoulders, the way his hand gestured forward. She blinked hard. The vision dissolved. Just another guard. Her throat closed. She pressed her forehead to the stock of her rifle, eyes shut tight. "Get out of my head, get out." But he never left. None of them did. By dawn, the team rotated out, dragging weary bodies back to the vehicles. Madison's muscles ached, her mind frayed. The drive back was silent, heavy with exhaustion. Inside the fob, Rivers gathered the team in the briefing room again. His tone was clipped, factual. "We saw movement. Nothing to suggest major escalation. Report goes up as expected, minor insurgent traffic. Advisory team remains advisory." Madison's head snapped up. Her voice cracked through the room. "That's not what we saw." Every man turned. Rivers' eyes hardened. "Excuse me, Sergeant." She stood, shoulders squared. "That compound isn't minor. It's command level. If we file it down as smuggling, we're blindfolding command while they regroup." The room pulsed with tension. Soldiers shifted uneasily. Rivers stepped forward, his voice like steel. "You're out of line." Madison didn't move, didn't blink. "I've been inside those walls. I've watched men die in those corridors. And if you keep pretending it's nothing, you'll be writing reports over their graves." The silence was suffocating. Finally, Rivers snapped. "Outside now." He stormed into the hallway. Madison followed. The door shut behind them. He turned on her, fury barely leashed. "What are you doing, Cooper? You think you can walk into my team and start dictating intel? You think a ghost story gives you clearance to second-guess me?" Her pulse hammered, but her voice stayed even. "You didn't see what I saw." His jaw flexed. "And what exactly did you see?" Her throat tightened. Words pressed hard against her chest. But if she told him, if she opened that door, the silence she had carried for 5 years would be gone forever. Her eyes flicked down to her wrist. The ink stared back at her, black and merciless. Finally, she whispered, "I saw the same compound once before, and I saw 25 men die inside it." Rivers froze, his anger cracked, replaced by something colder. "You're saying—" But she turned away before he finished. "Believe what you want, sir." Her voice was flat, final. She walked off, leaving him standing in the hallway, the weight of her words pressing like a shadow he couldn't shake. That night, sleep didn't come at all. Madison sat on her bunk, staring at the tattoo under the dim light. The coordinates seemed to glow, pulling her back, daring her to remember every detail. Her chest ached with the weight of silence, with the memory of faces gone. And somewhere deep in the compound across the ridge, lights flickered on. Men moved in shadows. Plans unfolded. The past wasn't done with her. Not yet. Why did silence always come before chaos? Why did the stillness of a mission feel heavier than the roar of gunfire? Madison Cooper knew the answer. Silence wasn't peace. Silence was a predator. The next 3 days dragged like years. The team rotated watch on the ridge overlooking the compound. Binoculars, scopes, long hours of waiting. Dust clung to skin, sweat dried in layers. Radios crackled with short reports, all of them reduced to the same conclusion: minimal activity, nothing major. Captain Rivers filed each update without hesitation. To him, it was just another advisory mission, just another assignment the brass didn't care about. But Madison saw more. She saw men moving in patterns too precise for smugglers. She saw supply trucks arrive in the dead of night, headlights killed before they crossed the gate. She saw flashes in the courtyard, communications gear tested and retested. Her chest tightened each time. She wanted to shout to force them to see. But every time she spoke, Rivers shut her down with the same cold words: "Stay in your lane, Sergeant." So she stayed silent, for now. The men grew restless. Some mocked her still, though softer now, like whispers in the dark. "Angel 7, they muttered, half in jest, half in fear. Others avoided her eyes altogether, as though afraid of what they might find there. But the young ranger watched her differently, not mocking, not fearful, studying, as though trying to understand how one woman could carry a ghost heavier than all their rifles combined. On the fourth night, the stillness broke. The compound lit up brighter than before. Trucks rolled in one after another, dust clouds rising under the moonlight. Figures moved fast, coordinated. Something had shifted. Madison crouched lower on the ridge, optics pressed to her eyes. Her pulse spiked. She keyed her radio, her voice tight. Movements increased, too organized for routine supply, possible staging for outbound ops. Rivers' reply came sharp. "Cooper, report medical observations, not tactics." Her grip tightened on the radio. For a second, she thought about ignoring him, thought about broadcasting the truth to every man on the net. But her promise of silence weighed heavier. Then another voice broke through, the young ranger. "Sir, she's right. Pattern looks like prep, not routine." Rivers snapped back. "Stay in formation, Private. Don't let ghost stories guide your eyes." The ranger went quiet. But Madison caught the glance he shot her way, even through the dark. He believed her, or wanted to. An hour later, the call came down from higher command. Rivers gathered the team in the cramped briefing tent, his face harder than ever. Orders have changed. We move tomorrow at dawn. Breach and clear. Limited objective. Confirm or deny enemy presence. A murmur rippled through the men. None expected it, not this soon. Madison's chest went hollow. She forced her voice steady. Sir, that compound isn't a limited objective. Once you breach, you won't just confirm presence. You'll trigger it. Rivers glared. You don't give operational predictions, Sergeant. You patch holes after the fact. Understood. The word sliced, but she didn't flinch. Understood, sir. He slammed the map down, stabbing a finger at the east gate. We go in here. Standard stack, minimal resistance expected. Keep it clean. Madison stared at the red circle on the map. Her stomach twisted. That gate. The same gate she had entered 5 years ago. The same gate where Carter fell, his blood soaking the dirt as she pressed her hands to his chest, begging him to hold on. Her throat tightened. She forced herself to breathe. Rivers' voice cut through again. Get rest. We roll at 500. The briefing ended. Men filed out, nervous laughter covering fear. Madison stayed behind. Her eyes stayed fixed on the map, her hands braced against the table. The young ranger lingered, stepping closer. His voice dropped to a whisper. You've been there before, haven't you? She didn't answer. He leaned in. That's why you know the patterns. Why you look like you've seen ghosts every time the compound lights up. Her jaw clenched. Some things aren't for you to know, Private. He studied her, then nodded slowly. Maybe, but if you've walked those walls before, you need to say something before we walk in blind. Her eyes flicked to his. For a moment, she saw the same hunger she had once carried, the need to understand, to belong, to survive. But she couldn't give him what he wanted, not yet. She turned, gathering her kit. Get some sleep. Sleep never came. She lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling, hearing the compound in her head. Gunfire, explosions, Hayes shouting orders, men screaming her code name, Angel 7. Her hands pressed to wounds that never closed, her ears filled with the last breaths of men who trusted her to bring them home. She clenched her fists, whispering into the dark, never again. But dawn came anyway. The convoy rolled out under pale light, engines growling low. Dust trailed behind them as they closed the distance to the ridge. The men checked weapons in silence, their faces pale under the rising sun. Madison sat in the back, her kit bag at her feet, her wrist exposed. The tattoo caught the morning light, dark and unyielding. One soldier noticed. His eyes lingered, then dropped quickly, as though afraid to see more. The vehicles halted short of the compound. The team dismounted, rifles ready, boots crunching against dirt. Rivers gathered them in a crouch, voice low but firm. East gate, quick and clean, no heroics, move. The men nodded, settling into formation. Madison's chest ached. Her body moved on instinct, sliding into position behind them. But her mind screamed. Every step toward that gate was a step back into fire, into ghosts, into memories that still tore at her in the night. The stack tightened at the gate. Breach charge set. Rivers raised a hand. On my mark. The world slowed. Madison's breath caught. Her hands trembled against her kit. The tattoo burned under her skin. She whispered, barely audible, not again. The charge blew. The gate shattered inward. Gunfire erupted. The silence was gone. And with it the past roared back to life. What happens when the past doesn't stay buried? When the ghosts you tried to silence rise again, not as memory, but as flesh, as fire, as blood. Madison Cooper had sworn she'd never relive Fallujah, but the blast of the gate proved her wrong. The charge blew inward. The gate shrieked on its hinges, splintered, then collapsed. Dust and smoke surged through the breach. Move, Rivers shouted. The stack pushed forward. Boots slammed into dirt. Rifles snapped up. Shouts filled the air, short, sharp, drilled into them by years of training. And then came the gunfire. Rounds ripped from inside the compound. Sparks flew against concrete. One man went down hard, his scream cut short. The others pressed forward, firing into the haze. Madison's breath hitched. For an instant it wasn't this compound, it was the other. Fallujah, the same gate, the same chaos, the same screams. Her chest seized, her legs froze. "Cooper," someone barked. She snapped back, forcing herself forward, Kit slamming against her hip. She ducked low, moving with the team, her heart pounding against her ribs. Inside the walls, the fight fractured. Shadows darted between corners. Muzzle flashes burst like lightning. Shouts in two languages tangled, echoing off stone. "Down!" a ranger yelled. Madison dropped behind a low wall as rounds shredded the air above her. Dust rained down, stinging her eyes. She reached for her kit. The motion was instinct, muscle memory older than fear. Bandages, tourniquets, morphine, her tools laid out in seconds. A man collapsed beside her, blood soaking his sleeve. Madison pressed into the wound, her hands slick, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "You're not dying here. Breathe with me. In, out." His eyes locked on hers, wide with panic. She held him steady, kept pressure tight until the bleeding slowed. She shoved gauze into the wound, wrapped, tied off, forced his hand against it. "Hold this, don't move. You hear me?" He nodded, teeth gritted. Another shout, "Medic." She spun. The young ranger was down near the breach, leg torn open, blood pooling. Her body moved before her mind caught up. She crawled low, rounds snapping past her. She reached him, dragging him behind cover, kit spilling open. He groaned, biting down on his sleeve. "I'm good, just patch it." "Shut up." Her voice was sharp, commanding. She cinched a tourniquet high on his thigh, twisted until his face went white, then packed the wound. "You're not good, you're alive. Big difference." His breath came ragged, but he met her eyes. "You've done this before." Her throat tightened, she didn't answer. Because in her mind she wasn't here, she was back there. Hayes shouting, Ramirez firing from the rooftop, Carter falling. Her hands pressed to another wound that wouldn't close. She shook it off, forced her focus. Stay still. Gunfire echoed. The compound roared with chaos. Rivers' voice cut through, furious. "Push forward, clear it." The team surged deeper. Madison grabbed her kit, half dragging the ranger until another soldier hauled him back toward the breach. She pressed on, heart hammering, ghosts clawing at her. Corridors twisted inside the compound. Narrow, dark, choked with smoke. Her boots slipped on grit. Her breath came fast, shallow. Every corner looked the same. Every shadow threatened to split open with fire. Her chest constricted. "Not again. Don't lose them again." She forced herself steady, rifle up, eyes sharp. Then she saw it. The east wing. The same corridor she had run through 5 years ago, carrying Ramirez on her back while gunfire tore chunks from the walls. The same door where Hayes had made his final stand. Her stomach dropped. She froze. Her vision blurred, splitting into two realities, the now and the then. Gunfire mixing with memory, shouts overlapping. Her pulse thundered in her ears. "Cooper," Rivers' voice snapped like a whip. "Move." She blinked hard, the vision fractured, shattered. She forced her legs forward. They breached the east wing. Rounds flew from doorways. The team returned fire, bursts echoing like thunder. A man screamed, went down. Madison dropped, slid to him, hands already working. Bullet through the shoulder, arterial fast. Her hands pressed hard, gauze soaking. Blood sprayed against her wrists, her teeth clenched. "Stay with me," she barked. "Look at me." His eyes fluttered, unfocused. She slapped his cheek hard. "Stay awake, damn it." He gasped, coughed, locked eyes with her again. She tied off the wound, shoved morphine into his thigh, dragged him back toward cover. Her arms shook with the effort. Sweat stung her eyes, but she didn't stop, couldn't. Because 5 years ago she hadn't saved them. Not all of them. This time she swore she would. Gunfire slowed. The last echoes faded. The east wing fell into eerie silence. Rivers barked orders, men sweeping rooms, clearing corners. Madison crouched against the wall, her hands red, her kit nearly empty. Her chest heaved. The young ranger limped up, leaning hard on another soldier. His face was pale but alive. He looked at her, voice hoarse. You really are Angel 7. Her stomach twisted. She turned away, eyes fixed on the floor. No, I'm just the one who lived. Rivers approached, sweat dripping, eyes burning. Cooper. She looked up. He gestured at the men she had pulled back, patched, saved. You kept them alive. Every damn one. Her jaw clenched. She didn't want his recognition, didn't want praise, not here, not in this place. Because she knew it wasn't over. From deeper inside the compound, a sound echoed, a metallic slam, heavy, purposeful. Every rifle snapped up. Rivers raised a fist, silence fell. Another slam, a door closing, locking. Madison's chest went cold, her pulse spiked, she knew that sound. 5 years ago she had heard it too, the moment the compound sealed itself, trapping them inside. Her voice broke the silence, low, urgent. We need to get out now. Rivers frowned. We're not finished. No, her voice cracked sharp, desperate. That's how it starts. That's how they close the net. Her eyes burned. Her hands trembled. The tattoo on her wrist felt like fire. The past wasn't just haunting her. It was repeating. What do you do when the walls start closing again? When the nightmare you barely survived comes back, brick by brick, breath by breath? Madison Cooper felt it before anyone else did. The air tightening, the silence thickening, the ghosts waking. The metallic slam echoed again, louder this time, a heavy door locking somewhere deep in the compound. Rivers froze, his hand still raised, eyes narrowing. Madison's voice cracked through the quiet. It's a trap, we need to move. The men glanced at her, uneasy, rifles shifting in their grips. Rivers scowled. We're not running blind because of your. Another slam, then another. The sound rolled through the walls like a drumbeat. One after another, doors clanging shut, corridors sealing, escape routes vanishing. Madison's pulse spiked. She pressed her back to the wall, fingers twitching against her kit. Her throat tightened, words spilling faster. This is their pattern. Lockdown first, containment next, then they push you toward the kill zone. The young ranger's voice cut in, raw and tense. Sir, she's right, look at the gates. Everyone turned. The east gate they'd breached was sealed, thick steel bars sliding into place with a groan. The way out was gone. Positions, Rivers barked, voice snapping the men into motion. Rifles swung, boots scuffed against concrete. But Madison's chest constricted. The walls around her weren't just concrete. They were memory. They were the same corridors from Fallujah, the same death trap. Her breath came short. Her vision swam. Breathe, she whispered to herself. Focus. Gunfire erupted before she could steady. From the west corridor, shadows surged, fighters pouring through, weapons blazing. The compound roared alive, muzzle flashes tearing the dark. The team returned fire, the hallway thunderous with echoes. Men shouted, rounds ricocheted, dust choked the air. Madison dropped to her knees beside the first man hit. A bullet had torn through his side, blood pooling fast. Her hands pressed hard, kit spilling open. Gauze, tourniquet, pressure. Stay with me, she shouted over the chaos. His eyes rolled back. She slapped his cheek harder this time. Don't you quit on me. Another shout, medic. She spun, 2 more men down. One dragging himself with a ruined leg, another clutching a shredded arm. Her chest burned. Her kit was nearly empty, her hands slick. But she moved, patching, wrapping, tying off, dragging men behind cover. It was Fallujah all over again. Her ears rang. Her body trembled. Every wound she touched pulled her further back into the fire she thought she'd buried. Hayes' voice echoed in her skull. Angel 7 move saved them. She bit down hard, jaw tight. I'm here, I'm here. But no matter how many she saved, more went down. The compound screamed with chaos. Rivers barked orders, his voice hoarse. Hold the line, push them back. The men fired, shadows dropping in bursts of light. But for every fighter that fell, 2 more surged forward. The young ranger crawled beside her, leg bleeding again, rifle clutched tight. His voice was raw. This is what happened, isn't it? This is the op you never talk about. She didn't answer, couldn't. Her throat was thick with ash and blood. His eyes burned into hers. Tell me I'm wrong. Her hands didn't stop moving, pressing into a wound, tying gauze until her knuckles whitened. But her lips parted, a whisper torn from her chest. You're not wrong. He froze, breath shallow. Then how did you survive? Her eyes locked on his, steady, hollow. I didn't, not all of me. Another blast tore through the wall. Dust rained from the ceiling. Men ducked, coughing, shouting. The compound shuddered like a beast waking. Madison pulled the ranger closer, shielding him with her body as debris rained down. Her heart pounded. Every nerve screamed. Then she heard it, the sound that broke her. A voice, faint, distorted through the smoke. Angel 7. Her blood went cold. She knew that voice. Hayes. Her the man she had buried in her memory, in Arlington's white stone rose. Her eyes snapped to the corridor. Through the haze a figure stood, broad shoulders, familiar stance. His silhouette was burned into her bones. Her breath caught, her vision blurred. No. The young ranger followed her gaze, confusion etching his face. What is it? Who? She blinked. The figure was gone, just smoke, just shadow. Her chest heaved, heart clawing against her ribs. Ghost, she whispered, that's all. But deep inside, doubt twisted. The fight raged on. River's voice broke through again. We're cut off, fall back to the central courtyard. The men moved, dragging the wounded, covering fire blasting from rifles. Madison followed, kit nearly empty, arms shaking from the weight of the fallen. They stumbled into the courtyard, backs to the wall, the compound pressing in on all sides. Madison's eyes scanned, frantic. She knew this layout, she knew how it ended. And she knew what was coming next. A trap wasn't complete until the circle closed, until the kill zone lit up. Her lips parted, voice hoarse. Get down. The words barely left her mouth before it came. A blast from above. Mortars slamming into the courtyard, fire and dust erupting, the ground splitting under their boots. Men screamed, thrown against walls, rifles clattering. Madison hit the dirt, arms over her head, lungs seared by smoke. Her ears rang, the world spinning. She crawled, dragging herself toward the nearest man, bloodied, unmoving. She pressed her hands to his chest, forcing herself to breathe, to fight through the ringing. Her vision swam, her heart pounded. This was it. This was Crimson Star repeating itself, down to the last scream. But this time Madison swore she wouldn't leave them behind. Even if it broke her completely. What does survival mean if it only brings you back to the same fire? Madison Cooper had asked herself that question for 5 years, and now, in the courtyard of the compound, surrounded by fire and screams, she finally had her answer. Survival wasn't luck. Survival wasn't mercy. Survival was debt. The courtyard was chaos. Smoke clung thick to the air, acrid and choking. Mortars pounded overhead, shaking the ground, raining dust and shrapnel. Men fired blindly into shadows. Some crawled, bleeding. Others pressed themselves against the walls, waiting for the next blast. Madison moved among them like a ghost. Her kit was nearly empty, her hands raw, her uniform soaked dark with other men's blood. She pressed wounds, tied tourniquets, shouted orders that weren't hers to give. Stay awake, don't you close your eyes. Pressure here tighter, no tighter. You're not done yet, you hear me? Her voice cracked, but it never broke. The young ranger dragged himself closer, face pale, sweat running into his eyes. He clutched his rifle like a lifeline, but his focus stayed on her. "You've been here before," he gasped. "This exact fight." Her chest tightened. She wanted to deny it, to bury it again. But the firelight on his face, the desperation in his eyes, it was the same as Hayes, Ramirez's, Carter. The same as all the men she had lost. She couldn't lie, not anymore. "Yes," she said. Her voice was low, steady. "I've been here." He stared at her, then laughed, a dry, broken sound. "Then tell me how we make it out." Her throat burned, her hands shook. She didn't have the answer. Because last time they hadn't. Rivers' voice cut through the chaos, hoarse and furious. "We're pinned. We hold here until reinforcements." "No," Madison snapped. She spun on him, eyes blazing. "Holding here is death. That's what they want. They'll pound this courtyard until nothing's left." Rivers' face twisted, anger colliding with fear. "And what do you suggest? You think you're in command now?" Her hands trembled, but her voice stayed iron. "I'm saying if we stay, we die. If we move, maybe we don't." He stepped closer, eyes locked on hers. For a long moment the two of them stood in the smoke, fury and defiance between them. Then another mortar slammed down. The blast threw them both to the ground. Madison's ears rang, her vision blurred. She pushed herself up, coughing, blood in her mouth. Around her, men screamed, bodies sprawled. And then she saw him. Rivers, lying on his back, shrapnel buried in his chest. His breath rattled, shallow, wet. Madison crawled to him, kit shaking in her hands. She pressed gauze to the wound, her fingers already slick with blood. "Stay with me, sir. Stay awake." His eyes locked on hers. For the first time the anger was gone. Only fear remained. "You were right," he rasped. "This is the same trap, isn't it?" Her throat closed. She forced her voice steady. "Yes." His hand grabbed her wrist, weak but desperate. His eyes burned into hers. "Then, don't let it end the same way." His breath shuddered, his hand slipped, his eyes fixed open. Madison froze, her hand still pressed to his chest, blood soaking her sleeves. For a moment the courtyard faded, and she was back in Fallujah, pressing against Hayes' chest, begging him not to go. "Don't let it end the same way." Her body shook, her eyes burned, but her voice rose, cutting through the chaos. "Fall back to the west wall. Move now." The men hesitated, confused, desperate. She stood, blood dripping from her hands, eyes blazing. "Now, or you'll die here." The authority in her voice broke hesitation. The team moved, dragging the wounded, firing cover. Madison led them through a narrow passage along the wall, bullets sparking inches from their heads. The compound groaned around them, alive with fire and fury. But Madison knew the path. She remembered every corner, every choke point, every shadow. She had walked it before. She had bled on it before. She would not let it end the same way. The men followed, step by step, trust shifting in silence. Even the young ranger, limping, bleeding, stayed on her heels. His eyes never left her back. "Almost there," she whispered, half to them, half to herself. "Almost there." They reached the west wall, thick, unyielding, but weaker than the gate. Madison pressed her hands against the stone, eyes scanning. She remembered, she knew. "Here," she said, "set the charge here." A soldier fumbled with the explosives, hands shaking. Madison steadied him, her fingers guiding his. The blast was set. "On my mark." The team braced, wounded dragged behind cover. Madison covered her head, teeth clenched. The wall blew outward in a roar of dust and fire. A gap torn open into the night. "Go," she shouted. The men surged through, stumbling into open desert, smoke curling behind them. Bullets chased, but they ran, every step tearing them further from the jaws of the compound. Madison was the last out. Her boots hit sand, lungs burning, chest heaving. She turned, staring at the walls, the fire, the ghosts within. For a moment she thought she saw him again, Hayes standing in the smoke, saluting her. Her throat tightened, her eyes blurred. She raised her hand, slow, trembling, and returned it. Then the smoke swallowed him. She turned, following her team into the dark. Hours later, back at the fob, the survivors sat in silence. Bandages wrapped, wounds stitched, eyes hollow. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The silence was its own language now. The young ranger sat near her, leg bound, face pale. He looked at her for a long moment before whispering, "You saved us." Her hands shook as she pulled her sleeve down, covering the tattoo. Her voice was quiet, almost a breath. "No, I just paid what I owed." He frowned. "Then what was that back there? What do we call it?" She stared at the floor, her eyes heavy, her heart heavier. "Dignity," she said softly. "Sometimes it doesn't speak, it just acts." The room fell silent again, but this time it wasn't mocking. This time it was respect. And for the first time in 5 years, Madison Cooper let herself breathe.